Welcome back again. You should be commended for hanging in there for so long. After all, it is session 5. You should be commended if for no other reason than you have to look at my ugly face every week. That's over and above the call of duty, I would say. And I can almost see the heads nodding out there right now. Seriously, I hope you're hanging in there and gaining some clear understanding of the topic at hand. And if not, once again, let me know. This week, we're going to continue our discussion of recruiting methods and separate the discussion a little to look at some of the lower level positions in the organization rather than the higher levels that we've been concentrating on. I will pay particular attention to employing contingency or temporary workforce and using that as a pool to recruit full-time employees. You'll see that this is not a bad way to recruit, but it can have its own dangers, and we have to be careful. I'll end the discussion of recruiting methods by giving you a couple of examples of proactive recruiting and some advice to always recruit. Recruit everywhere you are, and you'll see how that fits in the lecture. It was not unusual during my career for some of the people I admired as the best leaders to come into my office and say, I was at the ball game the other night and I spoke with a young lady who was looking for a job. She was smart, articulate, and seemed to have good skills. I would suggest we consider her for name the position. I asked her to give you a call, see what you think. And as often as not, those referrals had merit and they led to good employees. And most importantly, they were free. After discussing recruiting, we will delve into performance and defining the job, the criteria, and expectations using performance data. The text dives deeper into the performance issue, but there are some points I felt needed to be addressed in addition to the text material. Finally, I summarize where we are and once again hope that you are in the same place I'm in. There are still two pieces of the recruiting puzzle that I haven't discussed, internal recruiting and internal referrals. Well, external referrals too, as far as that goes. But I'll cover these next week. They are related to our discussion of performance and also related to each other. There are advantages and disadvantages to internal and external recruiting and referrals, as you might expect. Both topics share some of the joys and pitfalls together, so I wanted to cover them after the discussion on performance. So, session 5 begins now. Take heart, we only have 9 or 10 sessions left. I guess I really know how to spoil a good mood, don't I? All I can say is that 9 or 10 sessions of selection and compensation are infinitely better than 9 or 10 sessions of calculus or Shakespearean English literature. At least I think it is. Welcome once again to session 5. Well, we're certainly not finished, but at least we're making progress. So let's continue. We've been talking about recruiting methods in general, but I want to separate some of the discussion based on the target of the recruiting, such as higher levels in the organization versus lower levels. To this point, we've been discussing methods that are really more compatible for recruiting managerial, professional, and executive positions. Hourly and low-level clerical, salaried, administrative positions are often recruited differently. I won't speak for everyone, but merely to how I recruited for such positions in the organization from my own experience. You can extrapolate to your own experiences and to other methods that you've observed and apply those. You've heard my Nestle example, and that is certainly a process that is very dedicated and complex. You should have also gleaned from this example that I believe all positions are important, even the lower level positions. That said, these positions do require different methods and focus. Generally, these positions require only a local recruiting activity. In addition, they are less costly to recruit, and Nestle being the exception, of course, require less complex processes. There are still many assessments that can be used and are used in recruiting lower level positions. There are also many different recruiting methods that can be employed as well. The use of state employment security agencies are an excellent resource for recruiting these positions. Even at Nestle, we utilize the Virginia Employment Commission to help collect and screen applicants. These government organizations largely deal with unemployed individuals, but by request, such as with Nestle, they can function as an initial contact for all interested applicants. Although their technology may be a bit outdated, they are state agencies after all, they can still help organize applications and resumes and can assist in the initial screening. Another method of increasing influence is the use of contingency workers. Temp services, as they're often called, offer contract, unskilled, and skilled hourly employees, as well as clerical and administrative folks, to fill openings on a temporary basis. This method provides assistance in two distinct ways. First, they offer the option of using contingency workers instead of hiring full-time permanent employees. This is particularly useful when the open position has questionable longevity. Instead of hiring someone full-time and subsequently reducing hours or facing a layoff, the temporary alternative offers some safety for both employees as well as employers until the viability of the position can be verified. Contingency workers are often hired to work truly temporary positions within an organization. In the process of working, the employer can observe performance firsthand and assess various desired traits. When permanent positions become available, employers often use the temporary workers as an initial pool for hiring consideration. I know of companies who hire exclusively in the lower levels from contingency work pools. I caution against this in that it cuts out a good part of the labor market from consideration. You lose the employed population we spoke of earlier, and many of the unemployed population as well who choose not to work for a contingency agency. Not considering such a large part of the population limits success of any hiring process. But that does not mean that contingency workers shouldn't be considered for full-time employment when openings become available. The use of contingency workers offers great advantages, which accounts for the rapid increase of this industry in the labor market. However, there are some disadvantages which must be considered as well. First, extensive and continuous use of temporary employees generates a certain instability in the culture of the organization and can be counterproductive. In addition, there are real legal issues when using temporary employees to fill permanent positions to save money on benefits and other amenities that full-time employees would normally receive. An organization must be very careful how and where temporary employees are used. The website reference that I've supplied provides a good discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of using contingent workers. I would suggest that you read that. I should point out that some professional employees can also be hired on a contingent basis, and there are companies that specialize in providing temporary professional employees such as engineers and accountants. However, the bulk of this industry remains focused in the lower level positions. I have used temporary employees extensively in every company I have worked in for the past 20 years. They serve a great purpose. One must take great care not to use such employees too long or in too great a number or too frequently. The damage to the organizational culture and stability can be quiet and profound. Another method that provides access to medium level and low level positions are job fairs. I have used job fairs quite extensively as well, and they provide a great benefit. Job fairs are generally a collection of different potential employers located in one area at a specified time. A large number of potential employees are free to browse the employers, make contact, and provide resumes and applications. These fairs can be sponsored by educational organizations, communities, professional organizations, or any number of interested parties. The intent is to provide an intense recruiting and job search activity focused in one place during a very short time. While working for the Noel Group, we decided that we would hire between 3 and 5 MBA graduate students to professional positions to provide skilled people to learn our business and hopefully become future leaders. To accomplish this recruiting activity, I contacted several universities to determine if and when they would be hosting job fairs for graduating MBA students. Thunderbird University is a very prestigious MBA program located in the Phoenix, Arizona area. I attended their job fair and in one day saw hundreds of students receive several resumes and even had the opportunity to conduct informal interviews with some students. All of this was accomplished for the mere cost of a plane ticket to Phoenix and a little bit of my time. It was very beneficial. In addition, the students were exposed to nearly 50 companies, and instead of exposure like you experience on the internet, they actually were able to view the organization and touch the organization's product and talk to the company representatives about the culture. It was a good experience for all. Because of these advantages, job fairs are not likely to be replaced by the internet. They have their own merit and have been around for decades. In my example, Thunderbird brought organizations from all over the world, both large and small companies, to one location. However, many job fairs focus locally and target lower level positions and employees. Since many of you are in the job market, I would suggest that you investigate job fairs as a method to enhance your opportunities to find a position. Those of you working in the HR or management areas, I would suggest you also explore job fairs as a method of recruiting if you haven't already done so. This job fair example also demonstrates another recruiting method that warrants mentioning in your consideration. There were really no open positions available for these MBA graduates I mentioned. We were going to make positions to a certain extent to ensure that we had strength up and coming in the organization. I call this proactive recruiting. Recruit always. Look for talent everywhere and always. All management and executives should recruit constantly. If we wait until the need arises, we lose valuable time recruiting, assessing, selecting, hiring, and then it takes up to a year for a new hire to become fully acclimated in the job. If I need a person now, can I afford to wait for over a year to get the full benefit of the new hire? For critical positions, anticipate and recruit proactively. So how do we recruit proactively? Well, let me give you a real life example. Once again, those of you who have had me in the past may recognize this example, but it is a good one to illustrate the advantages of proactive or strategic recruiting. At the Noel Group, we had several distinct businesses under one corporate umbrella. Each of our businesses was headed by a president, and each president had their own executive team. In essence, they were run as separate business entities. One of our concerns was bench strength. In the businesses, particularly at the top executive level, we had that concern. Although we were grooming people to move into the top positions and we had contingency plans as to how we would fill the top positions, we were not completely satisfied that we were covered. We were not actively searching for a new president, but we were vigilant through our own efforts and the eyes of a few select headhunters to find potential candidates. I was introduced to such a person who was running a medium-sized business in our local community. Deborah was an impressive lady who had an engineering background, a master's degree, and was a Rhodes Scholar. I scheduled a luncheon meeting with her to determine her interest in leaving her current employer, even though I had no current open position. She indicated that she would not want to leave immediately, but sometime down the road, she may entertain a job change if the opportunity was right. I told her I was very interested in finding an appropriate position for her someday, and we would keep in touch. I returned to my organization and spoke with the owner, CEO, and other high-placed individuals and told them all we must hire this person at some time in the future. I was convinced that she had the intellect and the qualifications to contribute significantly to our organization in an executive role. I arranged another luncheon meeting with Deborah, myself, and the CEO. His comment to me upon leaving that meeting was, "I believe she is the smartest person I have ever met." I agree. We have to hire her at some point. We kept the dialogue going for over a year with periodic meetings and discussions. Finally, an executive position came open, and we hired Deborah. and she lived up to our expectations. This example makes a couple of important points. I have known leaders who are forever vigilant looking for talent. Talent does not always present itself at the time a job opening exists. At times, we must find talent and then cultivate a relationship until the proper opportunity presents itself. Human resource management should cultivate a culture in which the search for talent is continuous and not dependent on unfilled structured jobs. Also, the example illustrates that some unconventional recruiting tactics are long term activities. At this point, recruiting becomes strategic instead of tactical. The Thunderbird example illustrates proactive recruiting using job fairs to recruit within an organization to create future strength. My example with Deborah illustrates recruiting through normal community contacts to place a particular individual with perceived strength into top positions in the organization. Keep in mind that in both situations, I didn't have to bear significant recruiting cost. I recruited quality, exceptional candidates relatively free. You can't beat that. We discussed many recruiting activities, but let's review by outlining the methods used by a typical search for a moderately difficult managerial position. I would normally use a mix of methods, including employee referral, headhunters, and even some internet advertising. The agreement with the search firm, or the headhunter in this case, is that they are credited with all resumes they produce unless my search has discovered a resume first. It's a first come, first serve basis when it comes to fee consideration for headhunters. I would normally request referrals from internal employees, referencing friends, neighbors, professional acquaintances, former coworkers, and so on. This combination of methods taps into the unemployed market, internet advertisements, and the currently employed market, headhunters and referrals. And if I can fill the job from my own resources, internet advertising and referrals, I will accomplish the search with very little expense. But if I can't fill the position from my resources, I can turn to the headhunter resources without losing valuable time in the transition. In other words, I run multiple search options simultaneously. This gains the time efficiency of multiple search methods and the expansive search capabilities gained by looking at unemployed and employed potential candidates. Recruiting allows you to be creative in the tools you choose and the resources you use. Understand the environment in which you recruit. If you read about a local company that is struggling financially or a local company that will close the doors at a specific date, recruit that population. I have actually put signs up near the entrance and exit of facilities of struggling companies, of closing companies, and of my competitors announcing that my company is hiring. If you read about a company closing or cutting back in another state and they employ professional employees that you need, contact headhunters in that state or that area, or, and I've done this, contact the HR department of that company and arrange to interview the employees who are affected by the layoffs. In this case, everybody wins. Be creative, be aggressive, and recruit always. The future of your organization depends as much on who you will bring in as it does on who you currently have employed. Recruiting is a future activity that we often, to our detriment, treat as a present tense activity. Let's turn our attention to the topic of performance as it relates to recruiting and selection. I won't go into great detail on this topic since the text does a good job and we still have more on performance in future sessions, particularly when it's related to compensation. The text begins chapter 5 with a statement that summarizes the focus of this topic. You cannot determine whether an assessment is good or bad for selecting employees into a job until you first determine the things you want the assessment to predict. This requires clearly defining what effective job performance looks like in a specific job. Put another way, what does good look like specifically? Generally, performance is composed of two factors at a high level view. One I call hard skills, and the other I call soft skills. Pretty exciting and innovative language, huh? Hard skills can be measured readily, and we recognize those skills in most jobs easily. For a production employee, it may be units produced per hour. For a manager, it may be based on the revenue performance of their particular department, i.e., sales, meeting budget, cost savings, etc. For a football running back, for example, it may be yards gained during the season. Soft skills are much more difficult to measure and observe. For a production employee, it may include teamwork or attitude. For a manager, it may be how they treat employees or their ability to manage change. For a football running back, it may be teamwork, drive, determination, etc. All jobs have a mixture of hard and soft skills that define performance. As we go up in the organization chart towards higher level positions, it becomes more difficult to define what good looks like due to the mix of hard and soft skills. The definition is much easier at the lower levels of the organization because the jobs there are more structured. In the lower levels of the organization, you may want to produce X amount of product or provide X amount of service to Y number of customers per day, and that may be a common hard skills measure. There are certainly some soft skill requirements in these structured positions. How does the employee service those customers? How does the employee get along with others, etc.? But hard skills make up a greater part of the job than soft skills in the lower level jobs. Jobs in lower levels of the organization may consist of 70% measurable hard skills that are easier to see and to measure, and 30% soft skills that are hard to see and measure. At the management level, that mix may actually be reversed. That doesn't mean we still can't measure performance in the upper level positions. It just means it's more difficult. And by default, it becomes more difficult to match assessment tools to the positions to measure appropriate behavior in the job for recruiting and selection purposes. Let me give you an example. You evaluate performance all the time. You evaluate the performance of individuals, your doctor, your dentist, your children's teacher, the person who delivers your mail, just to name a few. You also evaluate organizations like your children's school, the local hospital, your grocery store, etc. To play off an example I used previously, I'm new to your community and I ask you to refer a good doctor. You refer Dr. Smith and say that he or she is a good doctor. My next question is, why are they a good doctor? What makes them a good doctor? What does good look like to you in terms of physician performance? Your explanation would probably include something about the physician's technical skills, something about the physician's personality, and something about the physician's support team or office team. I would likely question you further, trying to determine if your definition of good matches mine. If the criteria of technical skills, personality, and support staff are the same as my criteria, we may still not be in agreement as to what good looks like or our evaluation of good physician performance. What if the criteria looks like this, with 3 being very high in importance and a 1 being very low in importance? My criteria has technical skill very high, yours is not. My criteria has personality in the middle, yours is very high, and my support staff is not quite as important to me as it is to you. As you can see, technical skills are very important to me and not very important to you, perhaps because I may have a serious health issue and you only see a physician for an annual physical once a year. On the other hand, personality is more important to you than to me. So will your choice of a physician be pleasing for me? Maybe, but not likely. It depends on the range of performance within these important criteria points. But let's do the same evaluation on our mail person or our mail service, which isn't quite as high level as our physician. My criteria is, do they deliver the mail on time? Do they deliver the mail correctly? Do I receive my mail and not someone else's? And are they friendly and wave when they see me? Those criteria are pretty straightforward and kind of difficult to disagree with. I would suspect that delivering mail on time is the most important, followed closely by delivering it correctly, and being friendly is a distant third. As you can see, it is definitely more difficult to evaluate and agree on criteria for our position than a male person. And if you are recruiting a position for your family and a male person, if you could actually do that, the recruiting process for the male person would be much less complex. And any assessments you may apply would also be much more difficult to pick out and interpret for the physician than a male person. Remember, with a physician, we rated the importance of the criteria very differently. It becomes even more difficult if each of you have no idea or a fuzzy idea of what good performance actually is. You're not recruiting and selecting in that case, you're guessing and guessing. Now, I realize that this is a simplistic example, but it does put this selection problem and its relationship to performance into perspective. We can't begin to assess someone's potential to perform in a job if we have no idea what good performance looks like. We must understand and agree on the criteria and the mix of those criteria points in the job. Defining performance is important. So, how do you define performance? The text lists 4 steps in the definition process. Number 1, identify key performance outcomes. Defining desired results such as selling more or solving technical problems, attending work regularly. What are the important things that make that job worthwhile to the company? Number 2, use job analysis to define and describe critical employee behaviors, defining what behaviors actually drive success in the job. Look at high performing employees to help you define this criteria. Number 3, choose an assessment that is valid for predicting critical employee behaviors. If selling more is a desired outcome and time management is a critical behavior of top performers in sales positions, then develop an assessment or develop interview questions that define a candidate's skills in time management. And number 4, appropriately collect and interpret assessment data. This step is self-explanatory. Once you measure the attribute, then collect the data on all candidates and make comparisons. Also keep in mind, we are not merely trying to define acceptable job performance, we want to define exceptional job performance because that is what we want to duplicate in our recruiting and selection process. Defining exceptional performance so we can apply the appropriate assessment tools is difficult, but hiring anyone without a picture of what is acceptable and exceptional is disastrous. So, what is HR's role in this? HR must assist hiring managers in defining performance and then assist in the selection of appropriate assessment tools. Managers often don't have the expertise and particularly the objectivity and understanding to define performance for recruiting and selection purposes. It is up to HR to ensure that these important steps are not left out of the process. As stated earlier, we will have more to say about how to define performance in future sessions, but I would like to point out that often managers use performance appraisals to define performance and clarify performance. As I stated earlier, we will have more to say about how to define performance in future sessions, but I would like to point out that often managers use performance appraisals to define performance or to clarify performance. That works well if performance appraisal processes are current with the job requirements and are a reflection of actual performance. But often performance appraisals apply the same performance criteria to all jobs. There may be a delineation between lower level jobs and higher level jobs, and the organization may use different performance appraisal instruments for both levels, but they apply the same criteria across those levels. For example, organizations may apply the same criteria and performance appraisal instrument to engineering managers, sales managers, human resource managers, and accounting managers. Although these different managerial jobs may be at the same level in the organization, do they really utilize the same skills and attributes in the same proportion to perform each of their jobs? Does good look the same across all of these diverse jobs? Clearly not. Following our previous example, does a family physician, physician's assistant, general surgeon, emergency room physician, and brain surgeon all have the same skills in the same proportion when defining acceptable and hopefully exceptional performance? I would think technical skills would be way up the list in a brain surgeon, and personality would fall significantly in terms of good performance criteria for that position. On the other hand, personality may be more important for a family physician or a physician's assistant. An incompetent, friendly brain surgeon is not someone I want to do business with. Likewise, a highly technically skilled family physician who can't communicate and is generally surly by nature probably won't get another visit from me. Let me illustrate this point further. Let's assume that the organization has 3 performance appraisal instruments: one for hourly employees, one for salaried professional and low-level managerial positions, and one for high-level managerial and executive positions. The performance appraisal instruments for the low-level managerial and professional positions measures the following performance components: technical skills, leadership, communication skills, change management, decisiveness, problem solving, etc. These are mostly soft skills and are very important to both professional and managerial positions. But leadership skills are very important to managerial positions, but not so important to professional engineers. Technical skills are vastly important to professional engineers, but not nearly as important to managerial employees. This is not an either-or dilemma. I'm not saying that technical skills are not important for managerial positions, nor that leadership is not important for professional engineers, but the level of importance is clearly different. This is not a criticism of performance appraisal systems because I believe in them thoroughly. It is a limitation of performance appraisal systems in identifying exceptional performance. Having a separate performance appraisal instrument for every position would be impossible to manage and would bring even more subjectivity and confusion to the problem. I'm merely saying that all performance appraisal processes are subjective and become more so as we go up in the organization levels. Be careful when using performance appraisals to define performance in a position. It is tricky. So we must take additional steps beyond the performance appraisal process to clearly define performance for purposes of recruiting and applying assessment tools. Defining performance is hard but not impossible. Selecting assessment tools is hard but not impossible. The payoff for doing both well is huge. The negative consequences for doing one or both poorly is also huge. Let's make sure we take the same care in selecting our next manager as we do in selecting our next brain surgeon. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, and so is an opportunity to hire exceptional people. So once again, let's summarize where we are and where we have been and where we are going. Thus far, we have learned that recruiting, selection, and hiring are all one process, and one impacts the quality and effectiveness of the other. This process should be part of the overall strategic plan of the organization, and recruiting should also have its own plan. Analysis of what we have, what we need now and in the future, and what is available are all part of the recruiting strategy. There are significant legal issues connected to this hiring process. Analyzing the labor market is part of that strategic recruiting plan. The text discussed in Chapter 2 what assessments measure and how they work, and we learned that company brand is a very important factor in recruiting. We discussed the various methods of recruiting or fishing holes, including the internet, which also included headhunters, outplacement firms, state employment agencies, company websites. We also included job fairs and the use of proactive recruiting activities as well. In Chapter 3, the text categorized assessment tools as to how they collect data and how they interpret data. And in Chapter 4, in the text discussed validity and reliability of assessment tools. We discussed, in addition, the importance of performance in defining the job for recruiting and selection activities. So where do we go from here? You may have noticed that I left out two important sources of recruiting in my discussions. Internal recruiting and referrals both have advantages and disadvantages, and I want to discuss those further in the next session. This, in my opinion, is a very important discussion and deserves separate attention from the external recruiting. Also, it carries a real relationship to performance. Therefore, I wanted to discuss performance first and then discuss the nuances of internal recruiting and referrals. In addition, the text will define criticisms of staffing assessments. We are gaining an understanding of the recruiting and selection process in the organization while simultaneously gaining an understanding of the use of various assessment tools to facilitate the selection process. In the next 3 weeks, we will put all of this together so you have a thorough understanding of how to get exceptional people into our organization. The next problem is how do we keep them? And that is covered in the second half of the semester.